morning, good afternoon, everyone, especially those listening live. I'd like to introduce Lady Phyllis W. Curott from Temple of Ara, our special guest speaker today, also the woman chair of the Parliament of World's Religion. Not only that, she is a very prominent Wall Street attorney.
Not Wall Street, not Wall Street, not Wall Street.
Park Avenue. Wonderful workshop today. So let's get right on.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Ed. Thank all of you and those of you who are out there watching. I'm a little nervous because I haven't done this talk before. This is a first, and I have been gone. So many of you watching this may have the foggiest idea of who I am. And now I will date myself. So I began my journey, I'm going to be the fast version, I began my journey in the late 1970s when I was in law school, and essentially in response to an overdeveloped intellect, had a kind of shamanic break, which I didn't understand at the time, but I had the good sense to follow the breadcrumbs that the goddess, which is who it was, laid out for me. I followed them. And I think most people have an opportunity to have these experiences. The difference between myself and most people, at least at the time, was that they didn't follow the breadcrumbs, and I did. And almost immediately, the numinous that came and tapped me on the shoulder and beckoned me proved itself again and again and again. Because if it hadn't, I don't think I would have followed those breadcrumbs. But there was always a kind of objective verification of the impulse, the intuition that I had that I should follow the breadcrumb that was laid before me. So if I had a dream, it came true. If I had a premonition, it manifested. If I knew that the phone was going to ring and it was my mother, who did not call every day at 3 o'clock, but called rather randomly, but I always knew it was her. So there was always an objective side to the sudden opening, the cracking open of the universe. Before me, I had been raised in an intellectual, kind of left-wing, progressive household, with a sensitivity to my mother's side of the family, which was Jewish. But I was taught to believe in the goodness of the human heart and that we were responsible for the world that we lived in. And so I went to law school to become a social justice lawyer, which I was. Not Wall Street, actually. I was a lawyer working to clean up organized crime and trade unions when I first got out of law school. Talking about a big windmill. And now, trade unions, what are they? I say that, I don't even know what that is anymore. Things change. I was led through this remarkable cracking open of the world to a coven of witches in New York in 1980, 1981, when it was truly hidden. And my priestesses had been Gardnerian trained and decided to do something very radical, which was to start a women's group. So my tradition was a neo-Gardnerian kind of tradition. It was the Minoan sisterhood. And I worked with them for 3.5 years. Strange as it was when I first walked through the door, completely crazy, you know, the language, the symbolism, the gestures, everything was just like ridiculous. But the power was palpable and the women were fascinating, and I found that there was magic, that there was real magic, and that it was manifesting, that the things that had happened to me spontaneously had words and descriptions and ways of sustaining and cultivating and nourishing them. And, you know, we had a myth of our origin, you know, that there was this ancient lineage of initiatory traditions, and that we were descended from that. And now, 40 years later, we have really great academic scholarship and Ronald Hutton and lots of others saying, well, not quite, and yet. The same time that I was being led into what we now call Wicca, and which at the time we just called witchcraft, I was given an opportunity to work with Michael Harner's first group, now kind of famous, the Brooklyn group, that was started out of his academic teachings. He was the head of the graduate division of anthropology at the New School in New York, and had done his PhD work with Navarro, came back and wrote about his experiences and began to identify these core shamanic techniques, core shamanism. And before he created the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, some of his graduate students said, well, sounds cool, let's try it. And I had an opportunity to work with him. So from the very beginning, my work with Wicca and my work with core shamanism were intertwined and very mutually enriching. And after 3.5 years, I took a little time off and then started my own circle, and it evolved over much time into the tradition of Ara and ultimately the Temple of Ara. In the 80s, and then somewhat into the 90s, I was probably the only attorney who was also Wiccan or pagan, and so I had the fun of handling a lot of the early cases that established basic rights, the right to perform legally binding weddings, the right to perform rituals in public parks that were available to other religious traditions, which in fact incident arose at the 1993 Parliament in Chicago. I spent half that Parliament fighting with the city of Chicago to get a full moon ritual, which we were then reputed by various religions to have sacrificed an animal, at which we did not do, but I suspect it was because one of the pagans participating in the ritual was wearing a wolf skin on his head. The right to wear the pentacle in high school. I was involved in the pentacle case, the headstone case in the military. So a lot of early discrimination suits to establish the right of pagans and Wiccans to practice their spirituality, their religion in freedom and in peace. And in part because of that activism and in part because of my nature, I was public. I was public in 1983 and very public. I have great stories to tell about it, but not now. I made the decision that I could not practice my faith and be intimidated or be afraid. They didn't fit together. So come what may, I decided I was going to be public. And I have been ever since that fateful decision. And part of my activist nature led me to interfaith work and the Parliament of the World's Religion in 1993, and struggling, as you did, to open the doors, make sure that there was a good pagan presence. There were about 50 pagans who were there, and we were very lucky that we had the opportunity to present despite the obstacles. And there were those of us who understood the importance of being present at a global stage to represent who we are and to open the path. And I know there are a lot of people who, want to be in rebellion and to be other and don't care. But the older you get and the more you have children and your children have children, and it seemed to me that it was essential for members of our community to be understood and not misunderstood, and respected and safe, above all safe, because certainly even now it isn't necessarily. People can have their stores burned, their homes, etc. They can lose custody of their children. And the great tragedy of that, more than anything else, is that I know, after 40 years of this, I know that our community, as crazy and diverse, as rebellious and antagonistic towards, itself, it has been, that, and infantile in many ways, and, functioning out of, old retro concepts of magic as sort of the projection of will for self-gratification, which is not it. That in fact, underneath all of it, we have been granted the tools and the teacher and the way back home. And that we have, oddly enough, it wasn't what I expected when I started on this journey. We have been given a task and a responsibility, as was articulated before, really well, but also the means to live up to that responsibility. And we're here at this moment in time for a very profound purpose. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And I think it's a wonderful complement to your talk earlier. So that's who I am. A practitioner of a variation of this theme that we're all pursuing in our own unique ways and in various traditions around the world, increasingly growing numbers. Part of one of the fastest growing still, although we sort of slowed down, but the fastest growing spiritual movement in the United States, reborn around the world, wherever we, the ancestors of European, Fertile Crescent, and African converged and created, gave birth to Western civilization, that we're rediscovering our ancestral roots and our ancestral wisdom, and most of all, our teacher. So the myth of origin, you know, this uninterrupted lineage handed down, no, not true, not necessary. But the techniques, the practices, the essential core practices that are actually somewhat universal now within traditions all over the world, and the teacher is the same as our ancestors, and the wisdom is there for us. And I believe that this is the moment when that wisdom is essential to our survival and to our evolution and to the survival of our brothers and sisters of other species and of the earth itself. And I think that we have returned for a reason. So I want to talk to you about what that reason is in more detail. And I'll start just by explaining one little thing more about myself, which was that as you were speaking about bringing the sacred into the world, I was working, having been called to work with the Genius Loci, the spirits of the place, very much in Italy, which for me has always been, you know, my sacred place from the beginning. And the Green Man appeared to me, which is the story actually finally back to work on the fourth book. I should say I've written 3 books, and then I took a long break. And so now I'm back to writing again. And the first of the 3 books is about this encounter with the Green Man and the journey that it set me out on. But he appeared, and he was photographed by one of my students. He appeared in the middle of the labyrinth during the first night of the first initiations that I was doing in Italy after making the pledge in my initiation many years before that I would go back to Italy, which was a crazy thing for me to pledge, and help rekindle the old religion in the lap of the goddess. And he appeared. And I felt him, but didn't see him because I was afraid to turn around. And a year later, when I went back to work with these students, the heart doctor brought me over to her computer. She had taken a photograph with her phone in 2004. You'll love this. And there it was on her computer. And there he was, standing. And I told no one about my encounter with him. And there he was, right behind me, covered in leaves, but looking a little bit like you. Crossed arms, the whole thing, and very technological. We'll discuss this later. And it blew my mind because I was used to going into non-ordinary reality with shamanic technique, ecstatic practices, dreams, also, right? But I was not used to having the occupants of multidimensional reality coming so specifically and so corporeally into this one. And it really blew my mind. Which you would think after, at that point, in more than almost 25 years of working, it wouldn't have, but it did. It really blew my mind. And it launched me on a journey, which was an extraordinary journey that ended with a blessing from an indigenous grandmother. And a severe, sudden sickness, you know, the Montezuma, you know, that spiking fever, and I came out of it and I was given an epiphany. And I was afraid to talk about it. I mean, it's been 15 years. Even within my own community, I was afraid to talk about it. because it's like, who am I? This is always my issue. I mean, who am I? I'm not good enough. I can't do this. But the mother spoke to me, as she speaks to all of us, but she was very clear. And she said, as I was coming out of this fever and I was sitting in my backyard, and she said, I am your mother. I am the mother of all beings. I am the mother of creation. And all beings live according to my principles, according to my laws. All things live in harmony with me, with my wisdom. All beings except you, my human children. You have forgotten. With the gift that you've been given of consciousness, you have not learned how to hear and to see and to remember, and you have forgotten. You've forgotten what I teach you. So I will tell you again, and you must learn, and you must learn quickly, because the fate of all my children resides in your hands. So you have to learn how to live again according to my laws and my principles. And then she just sort of downloaded this thing. And I was, like the first time I encountered her in this sort of physical expression with the appearance of the Libyan Sibyl, everything sort of bleached out. And I was very nauseous, but I went inside, I wrote it down as quickly as I could. And then I tried to understand it, because it was a download. It was an epiphany. So it wasn't here, right? It was information. And I spent the next 10 years living with it and trying to see if it was true. And of course, being still an intellectual, I took a scientist's and an intellectual approach to trying to understand if it was true, looking at ecology, and then ultimately winding my way back to indigenous traditions and seeing that, yes, it's true. It's true. And then I struggled with myself, whether I was good enough, because at the end she said, I give it to you and your job is to carry it forward, to carry it back into the world. And then I was like, impossible, impossible, I'm not good enough, and who am I, and you know, all that bullshit. And then I stopped and I was like, you don't have to be. You don't have to be. Just do the best you can. That's all. Just, you made the promise, you said you would. Just, if she trusted you with it, then just do the best you can. And in that long period, while I was struggling with myself, lack of self-worth, I also decided that if it was only true if you used magical technique or shamanic technique, that it wasn't good enough, because no one not no one, but not enough people would get it. So it had to be universal. If it wasn't universal, if you couldn't discern it just by sitting in your backyard, or drinking a cup of water, or breathing, then it wasn't going to work. Because you all, and you all, and you all, and you all are rare. You are what my mom would call a rara awis, the rare bird. You are the pioneers, the true rebels, the avant-garde, the vanguard of the way forward. You are the seed planters and the seed nourishers, and you are the visionaries. And you're rare. You're rare. But if the truths are universal, you know, if the birds know them, and the bees know them, and the trees know them, and this little green plant knows them, then there has to be a way for us to know them without having to go to Italy, sit in a labyrinth, you know, go into an altered state and have the green man appear to you. You have to be able to do it when you get up in the morning. It has to be true. It has to be true for all of us. And so I needed to figure out how to get there as simply as getting up in the morning and knowing it to be true when you take that first breath. And until I could do that, then I couldn't talk about it. I don't think I'm ready to talk about it, but then the invitation started to come. As soon as I said, all right, because it's been a really long time and I better get started. And all of a sudden, of course, and you all were very kind and invited me, so I made an outline, which of course I haven't looked at yet. So this is the first time I'm giving this talk to my community. because I consider the Correllians to be my community, and the Gardnerians to be my community, and the Alexandrians to be and the core shamanic practitioners, and the progressive Christians and the interfaith world that I've resided in, and the Sufis and anybody who is seeking the way forward in this time of crisis. So thank you for indulging me while I do this and being patient with me as I find my way. I'm hoping that in a few months it'll be very, very lucid and concise and persuasive. So, why now? One reason that I was in crisis for the last 10, 12 years was that when I woke up after this download, I looked around and I saw what we were doing. And I saw the devastation. And I saw the damage. I saw the damage that I did every day, inadvertently, you know, just by getting in my car and going anywhere, or turning on the lights, or make a list, you know. The way that we live is so disconnected and so damaging to the planet that it's inescapable. And then I looked at the big stuff, you know, the pollution. Where I live, I moved out of New York City and I went to live out in the rural part of the East End, which is farms and fishermen, and the fish are dying, you know, they're dying. The fishermen tell me that the fish that was there even 10 years ago, dying. And I realized, I wrote about it in Book of Shadows, the first book that I wrote, that part of my spiritual awakening was the awakening to the fact that I was alive in a culture that was the wasteland, that I was alive in a culture that was essentially kind of a culture of death. The dominant motif of Western civilization, right? That we live in either inanimate matter, which is to be understood through science and manipulated, or the Christian, the Abrahamic model that, you know, it's fallen from grace, it's sinful, it's, you know, we've been given dominion over it, right? We know this, we understand this. And the result of it has been several things. It's been this complete devastation and destruction of the planet because our attitude has been that it's here for our use, our disposal. We use it and we throw it away. We treat it like a combination supply depot and garbage dump. And to me, it's a reflection of our spiritual crisis. In fact, the environmental crisis is a reflection of our spiritual crisis. When I looked around, I went into a spiritual crisis. I really did. I went into a prolonged depression and grief. I curled up into a fetal position, essentially, you know, and I couldn't move. I was so overwhelmed by the devastation that we wrought. And, you know, whatever I read, you know, and the first parliament in 1993, who got up was, not Milton, terrible, but the opening, at the opening convocation, there's a scientist who'd been asked to do the Global 2000 report by Jimmy Carter, and he talked about what was happening to the planet, and we had the visuals up behind him, and I was crying through the whole thing. I was weeping. So, to open your heart to the sacred at this moment in time is to open your heart to devastation, right? It is a cracking open. But many years ago, I had a dream that, a very vivid dream, one of the big dreams. It was the tarot card, the Ace of Cups. And suddenly it cracked open. And in the dream, I was like, oh! You know, the Grail is breaking, which is the earth, right? The womb of creation is breaking. But out of it flowed this molten light. And I heard this, your voice, you know, the radio voice. The voiceover, as this light flowed out of it. The Grail must crack for the life within it to flow out into the world. And that dream has stayed with me ever since. So spring, this is the moment of the cracking open. This is the moment of our hearts breaking. This is the moment of having the courage to look at what is truly happening right now, in all of its horror and all of its devastation. And taking the time to grieve, to honor the death and the devastation that we are responsible for, right? In all the great ways of the pipelines and the election of the of fisher kings, of wounded kings who are, mad, to the thousands of daily cuts that we make inadvertently because of where we live and how we must live in the world in which we live. The thing about our community, as crazy as it is that we are the seekers and the keepers of a mystery. And the mystery that we are the keepers of is the mystery of rebirth. And this is one of the great gifts of the Mother to all of us, no matter our spiritual tradition, right? Whether it's through ideas of reincarnation or spiritualism, or how, that initiations in whatever tradition, or not, if you're not in a tradition that initiates, your life will initiate you. This is the ancient shamanic wisdom and the mystery schools, that were the early civilizing forms of them. That what dies is reborn through the Mother, always. And this is the moment of death and rebirth. And we are the agents of that rebirth. We are the keepers, we're the seekers of that mystery and the keepers of that mystery. In whatever tradition that you are called to, in whatever way that you practice, in whatever way that the mystery comes to you and speaks through you, this is the ultimate mystery that we are charged to defend if you're a warrior, to understand if you're a wise keeper, to nourish if you're a mother, to heal with if you're a healer, to create with if you're an artist, to disseminate if you are an advocate, that this is the wisdom at the heart of who we are and the responsibility that we have been called to. She called me, I want to share. I believe that this is what we're all called to, but in our own ways, in our own ways, in our own traditions, in our own personal ways. At this moment, where the environmental devastation is a reflection of this wound, this separation that started thousands of years ago when we said we have power over this, that we are the height, we're the top of the pyramid, and God gave us the whole thing and it's ours to use. God is not here. God's gone. He left. He's up there somewhere. And we at that moment, this abyss opened and we fell into it. That was the moment that the wasteland began, and it's grown and grown. That we blinded ourselves. You're using the Prometheus metaphor, which is really good, but also like Oedipus, that we blinded ourselves to the divinity of the world in which we reside. The grace within ourselves, the divine that's within us, which is also very much a part of these spiritual paths, for sure, and the divinity of the world in which we live. We've tied on, I prefer to think that we've tied on a blindfold. And through the revival of the indigenous tradition, suddenly, right, this fascination that the West has with indigenous traditions and this respect that they have for them. It is an awakening, it's a sort of a sense memory, right, of our own ancestral wisdom, our own ancestral traditions that we've gone in search of, and that we are finding, in fact, and the teacher. The core practices, the circle, the honoring of above and below, and each of the elements in the four directions, and the placing of the self at the altar, at the center, right? The reconnection to the web of life through the elements and through we have these core practices that reconnect us. And I believe that beneath, sort of the ephemera of the practices are these very profound and deep techniques that reconnect us to the web of life that we disconnected ourselves from thousands of years ago. We're living in the end time of as you said, what you do here, this small thing, I sail. So, you make a tiny course correction of a few degrees. And by the time you're home, you're way over here. You set the mindset, the cultural identity, the belief structure is set thousands of years ago, and here we are. Here we are, thousands of years later, with the destruction of the womb of life. Injured though she may be, she is alive. She is alive, and she is what she is, and he is what he is, and life is and continues. I don't know whether we can change it. You know, driving the 95, the cart, or the density of population, the density of culture, the density of the illusion of consciousness, the illusion of consciousness that we are separate, right? What Einstein called that separation consciousness. Can we change it? I don't know. You know, are there enough of us? I don't know. 100 monkeys? Maybe. This, extraordinary. The reach, the vast, I really hope so, right? The technique, I am completely convinced of that. Easy. Any religion, anybody, no religion, you can do this, and your eyes are gonna pop up, and the blindfold's gonna fall off, and you're gonna see that you live in a sacred world. If for no other reason, then you choose. You choose to live in a sacred world. Because ultimately, if it's a mystery that we can only get to the extent of our limited human capacities, right? So there's this infinite amount that we'll never access. And if I think we can prove it. I mean, I think that's one of the wonderful things about core shamanic indigenous traditions is that they have this extraordinary capacity to experience the numinous, that you're not believing it, you're experiencing it. Magic is real, it works, it's astonishing, it's extraordinary. We live in a world that's alive, and that's conscious, and it's aware of us, and that's sacred. So you don't have to believe it. It's real. Is it enough? It might be. We have to act as if it could be. And in the end, if it's not enough to change it, it will be enough to preserve the seeds, to carry them forward. That's why you've been doing this for so long. To carry the seeds of wisdom, the sacred wisdom, that the mother, that the teacher, that the same teacher that our ancestors had, who will still be here, wounded, perhaps not as able to teach them as easily to us because things will be so out of balance, because that which the life-sustaining cycle of which we've been the extraordinary beneficiaries will be other, right, in an effort possibly to wipe us out down to the 5% to start again. The seeds will be all the more essential during this period of death, in order to assure the rebirth. And in the end, if we can do no more than persuade those who don't believe in the numinous and don't want to make the effort to learn the techniques and, you know, master themselves and enter the mystery, my goal, at least, is to say to them, fine, I agree. There's all this mystery that we can never know. We can only know to the limits of our very limited human capacities, and so, but maybe God or Goddess or the sacred or the numinous isn't real. And maybe I'm making it all up. Maybe we're all making it up. Okay, fine. I'm going to take responsibility for that. I'm going to say that's right. And you know something? I am choosing to say that creation is sacred. Every bit of it. Every last particle, every last non-particle, every little amoeba, every lightning strike, every deer, every bunny rabbit on the path, everything I eat, everything I breathe, everything I drink, everything I shit, everything I pee, everything I do is in a connected container of sacred. I choose to call it sacred. And I choose to relate to it as sacred. I choose to figure out what that means, because I'm not really sure, because I haven't lived in a world that has honored itself and each other, and its context is sacred. That's the great undertaking. I choose to see the world as sacred, and I choose to relate to it that way. And it's the right choice. And I suspect it's the choice that will keep us alive. But it's the right way to live. It's a better way to live. It's a happier way to live. It's a lot more fun. It's also a lot more heartbreaking, because we live conscious of the contradiction of all the things, including our own actions every day, right, that are the old way, where nothing was sacred. So, what she said to me, this part I'll read, if I can find it. Okay. Yeah. Oh, this is good. I have to. That we're lost in a hall of mirrors, right? That we've lost ourselves in a hall of mirrors. But here's the thing. Okay, so I gotta go back to my notes. So everything we need, first of all, you make a choice. Okay, so we made a choice. But having made the choice, here's the good part. If you're like us, if you're practitioners of the sacred technology, right? You have, wow, it's like Disney World, you know? There's like all these cool rides, and they work. They deliver. And then if you're not, there are all these very simple practices, one of which I hope, yes, will do like this incredibly simple thing, which to me blew my mind when I did it. And it's like, now I do it every morning when I get up. So there's this sort of simple way. And that's connected to, here's the deal. Everything we need is already available to us. All the ways we need to get reconnected to the sacred context, to the divinity that we're all seeking, right? Or to the sense of the sacred, is all around us. It's just a question of taking off the blindfold and starting to see what's there. The natural world is the embodiment of divinity. The air you're breathing, the water you're drinking, you, me, although I have a hard time with that one, the camera. So this is my complementarity to your election from before. Both true. We're getting mastery of the ether. We still have no mastery of this. This is essential right now. This is everything right now, because without this, that's not going to save us. That will help us do this, though. I really believe this. So, I think that's one reason that you guys, you know, hello, right out the door. Here we are with your, like, here in the whole friggin' world. So, that world, the natural world, not the human-made world, because we've screwed it up so badly, but the natural world is an embodiment of the divine. You don't believe in goddess you here. You don't believe in the green man. It appears to you. And it doesn't have to be, you know, in an altered state of consciousness, in a labyrinth, you know, in the gorgeous Tuscan hills of Italy. It's right here. It's within us, and it's all around us, and it's in everything that we're doing all the time, all day long, in infinite, countless ways. The divine is revealed by the natural world. It is embodied by the natural world. And we know, regardless of whatever... Did you turn it on?
No, it's on.
It's on. No, it is on. We know, this is my brain multitasking. We know. Through the practices, right? For all gardeners making stuff up and all the ceremonial and all that, right? There was an essential, instinctual, ancestral, indigenous wisdom. The circle, the four directions, the lunar mysteries, especially for women, the Sabbath cycle, however it's kept, you know, depending on where you're living. But the truth of bringing ourselves into harmony with the natural wisdom revealed through the season, right? Expressed through the season. That by bringing ourselves, just that simple, that bringing ourselves into harmony, the teacher can reach us and the wisdom can be revealed. I got 10 pages of all this stuff, but here's what she said to me. So when we do this, and when we stop and we pay attention, that was when I had to do old-fashioned media was privileged to do media, old-fashioned media, like Bill O'Reilly and those guys. And I had to be able to shrink wrap all this stuff down into sound bites. And one of the things that was very obvious to me, what's a witch? And I go, oh, well, a witch is a wise one, and the witch, forget it. A witch is somebody who's paying attention. Practitioner of this, whatever this is, this spiritual movement, in all of its diverse, mad beauty, it's somebody who's paying attention to what happens when the sacred enters this world, behind you in a labyrinth in Italy, or in a dream, or in a tarot reading, or in whatever form, right? It comes to you, or a journey into non-ordinary reality, or the sign, whatever it is, right? That comes to you from the sacred, where we've put a lot of our attention and effort in the last 30, 40 years of learning to cultivate altered states of consciousness in order to perceive the sacred. Absolutely. But when the blindfold comes off, it's the capacity to see that this is alive and sacred and numinous and embodying divinity. And so what she said was, here are my principles. Now, I've tinkered with them, and I don't know if I've made them better. One day they take this shape, and then my writer's thing comes back. But there are 12 of them at the moment, like the 12 apostles, or the 12 the zodiac, but they sort of shook out into 12 things. If I give this talk in 6 months, maybe there'll be 5, but it's right now. So, all is one, all is sacred. 2, the earth is our mother. 3rd thing, everything is part of an interconnected and interdependent web of life. Everything on earth has a purpose. Everything has a purpose. The natural order of life is balanced and harmonious. It may fluctuate, right, with great storms, but ultimately there is a larger balance that is operating. So there's balance and harmony in all things, always. Life is created and it's sustained and it's transformed also by the continuous exchange of energy. So there's a flow. There's this constant flow and movement of energy from, as you also were saying earlier, right? That we're breathing each other's. Life is constantly changing. We have this chant, right? One thing becomes another, and the mother, and the mother. Life is constantly changing from one form into another, and there's no waste. The way she does it, nothing is wasted. It's broken down and put back together again. You know you're a farmer, right? Yeah. There's no waste. There's no waste. And this I love because, there's like this perfect complementarity. As I was listening to it, I was like, opposites, we've grown up in this thing of like opposites being, right, at odds. No. Opposites are in fact complementary. Doesn't matter whether it's female or male or transgender, whatever. There is a polarity, but the polarity is complementary. It works together. It's dialectical. By interacting, evolution, you get something new. So there's a relationship between opposites. They are engaged with that's the flow of energy and the mutual exchange and the balance and the harmony. But you bring two opposite things together and you don't get war. That's the stupid. You get creativity. There's this principle of creation, the evolutionary principle of creation. They create something new. Evolution requires cooperation as much as competition. Competition is true, right? But it was like viewing the world like this, to say, you know, nature is red of tooth and claw, you know, that it's the survival of the fittest. Yes, but they now know, finally, because they're paying a little bit of attention, right, that cooperation between species and even within species is essential to the survival of life, of all species. Cooperation is just as important as competition. Thank you. The natural state of life is one of generosity and abundance. I have to tell myself that because I left the world, you know, and I really took myself down to bare bones. I went into the cave and into grieving for a long time. And we're living in a world right now where everything is skewed. You know, the 0.1% controlling 95% of the wealth. In natural systems, they break down when all the energy, all the good, whatever, you know, is here, and everything else is starving. The systems break down. We're living in a broken system right now where greed, because greed is good, right? It's complete distorted, whacked out, disconnected culture that we've created. Energy flows, energy has to flow, energy has to flow. The natural state, you know this, you're a farmer. And this is the moment of this. You don't have to do anything except stay out of the way. And the earth explodes with life. And if you'll work with her, she'll feed you, and she'll clothe you, and she'll give you a place to live, you know? Because there is no part of us that isn't a part of her. There's no part of us that can survive without her. The 3 rule, the rule of 3, it's not what you send out returns to you 3 times, no. 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours without shelter in extreme conditions, 3 weeks without food, and then you're recycled. That's the law of 3. And the reality is that life on Earth is, and it's really true, right? You could go to the North Pole, and there are friggin' penguins and polar bears, and there's seals, and there's life. You can go to a desert, and there's life. You know, there's no water, it's boiling hot. There's life. You go to the bottom of the sea, where there's no light, right? And there's sulfur coming out of fissures, and there's life. There's life. The nature of life, the blessing, the sacred, holy revelation is this abundance that it's all set up to sustain life, to nourish it and create new life. And it's extraordinary. Yes, if I'm in the jungle and a tiger eats me, not so good for me. But it doesn't make the tiger evil. It's the way it works. I mean, yes, there is the struggle that life feeds on life, okay, but then we honor that, right? And we give ourselves to it when the end comes and we feed life. So coming to the end, that our true nature, who we really are, can only be found in nature's truths. We have cut ourselves off. We live in this hall of mirrors. We've forgotten who we are and where we are. And so we've forgotten why we're here. And it is the time now for us to remember. The mother is calling to us very loudly, you know? And species evolve when their survival depends on it. And this is the moment. This is the moment. And the last one was that love is the energy of life. That's why it's abundant, and that's why it's generous, and that's why it's cooperative, and that's why it flows, and that's why... really, it is love. It is love. I went, right before I skidded off the rails and into my cave, I went into a cave, literally, in Utah. This was well before the Parliament Police in Salt Lake City. I wanted to see if I could survive, because I had never done survival stuff in extreme natural circumstances, and I went in December when it's very, very cold, and hiked down into the canyon country, which is like the roughest wilderness left in the United States. And I had somebody with me who knew the area and who spent time there. And as it's a mile down, and then it was 8 miles in. And as you're going in, you pass these ancient pictographs that are on the walls. There's one very famous one called The Visitors, and it looks like, from out of space, ancestors from out of space. And it's up on a canyon wall, like how they got up there to do it is amazing. And we stopped there, and I offered some prayers, and then we slept every night in a cave-in. I had to have a filter to filter water. I had to have a mummy bag, shelter, or I would have frozen to death the first night. I had to bring my own food because it was winter. There was nothing to eat, and if there was, I wouldn't have known what it was or how to kill it. Forget it, I'm not killing rabbits. I mean, forget it. So if I could have caught one, it wasn't going to happen. I would have been dead. Three, gone. I had to bring in all this modern stuff, right? Because it was a hostile environment. On the way out again, and it's a longer story, but after a few days there, and you're not eating a lot, and you're drinking water, but it was really a test. It was the same, it was adjacent, the canyon that I was in was adjacent to the one. Do you remember that young man who was vaulting off of the thing, and they made a movie about it, and the rock came down and pinned him, and he had to cut his arm off? Okay, so Aaron, I was in the next canyon. He was vaulting down to conquer the canyon, and the canyon gave him what he asked for. She gave him what he asked for. A life and death struggle, right? He thought again to conquer her, but you can't conquer much. But I have never felt the presence of the Divine Feminine as powerfully as I did in that mood. And one of the ways I felt it was that if I thought something, it manifested. Even in, very little to manifest, it would appear. It appeared to him as well. On the way out, I realized I would have been dead without all my modern conveniences. I would have been dead in 2 seconds, like most of us, children of civilization. We don't get dead in 5 minutes. But on the way out, we went past the wall again with the visitors, and I looked at it, and I realized people had lived in that canyon thousands of years ago. I think it's about 8,000 years old. They lived there. They knew how to live there. They figured out how to live there. And they lived there well enough to make art, to make sacred art, to make sacred art. If our ancestors could do it under much more punishing circumstances, then certainly we must be able to do this as well. And what I know is that she will teach us everything we need to know to do this. It's time for us to come back to figure out our place in the web of life, where we are, and why we're here, and what our role is. Everything in nature has a purpose. And it is time for us to figure out what our purpose is. At this moment, at this critical moment, when the earth is imperiled, and its capacity to sustain and to create life is so imperiled, it's so at risk. That is clearly our purpose. Our purpose is to bring ourselves under control, right? To know ourselves, know thyself, to know ourselves, and to return to her wisdom, to her teaching, and to learn to live in harmony with her, because to live in harmony with the natural world is to live in harmony with the divine. So I'm just going to do 2 things, okay? Green breathing. It's what a lot of Wiccans, pagans, heathens, whatever, I don't know, whatever place up. So it doesn't matter. Whatever you call yourself. The mother calls you her children. And this is the moment to remember who we are. And if you're a warrior, this is the moment to take up the cause for her. And if you are a wise one, this is the moment to become wise in her ways. And if you're a healer, this is the time to heal the self and to begin to heal her. And if you're a priest or a priestess, this is the time to really serve her mysteries. And if you're none of those things and you're a skeptic and you've stumbled on this, then I'm going to suggest you do what we do, what lots of us do, which I don't know whether our ancestors did it or not, unless they, practiced yoga and came from the Hindu traditions, but Buddhists do it, Christians do it with some with prayer and many with singing, and Jews do it with davening, whether they're conscious of it in recitation, and we all do it. So I would like to suggest that we do it in a different way. That's green breathing. So just close your eyes. If you're out there, close your eyes. We're going to do it the traditional way initially. Chi, prana, breath, that we exhale and relax our bodies, and then we inhale deep, full breaths that we hold for a count of 3 and quiet our minds. I'll just keep talking and you just keep breathing. You don't have to keep in sync with my words. Just deep breaths, inhaling, holding, expanding the lungs, and quieting the mind, and exhaling, completely emptying the lungs and relaxing the body. Inhaling and growing still and quiet, feeling the prana, the chi, the energy of the sacred entering you, circulating through your body, pumped by the heart, carried by the blood, energizing your organs and your muscles, and exhaling and allowing the body to relax. Inhaling, growing still and quiet, peaceful, and at ease. And exhaling and the body becoming still and quiet and at ease. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhale and exhale. This alone alters our consciousness and opens us to the sacred. When we bring our attention to what we're doing, everything changes. So as you inhale now, inhale deeply and recognize that with each breath that enters you, you are receiving a gift of life from your brothers and sisters who are green. And exhale and return the gift of life to our brothers and sisters who are green. Inhale. Breathe in the oxygen upon which our lives depend, and exhale and return the gift of life, the carbon dioxide on which their lives depend. Inhale in the cycle of giving and receiving, everything in perfect balance. Exhale and return the gift of life. Inhale and receive the gift of life with gratitude. And exhale, expressing the gratitude with reciprocity, in perfect balance, giving and receiving, in perfect balance, in perfect harmony, giving the gift of life, inhaling and receiving. Every breath is an exchange, a perfectly balanced gift of giving and receiving life. Every breath connects you with the green things on this planet. Inhale and receive the gift of life. Exhale. Return the gift of life. Green entering you. Green exiting. Every breath connects you to Mother Earth and to Father, Son. It's the first thing you did when you got here. It's the last thing you'll do when you leave. Once more. Inhale and receive the gift of life. Exhale and return it, and when you're ready, open your eyes. The sacred is as far away as the breath of life. We know it's utopian, but that's the purpose of any great religion, isn't it? And if we don't hold the seed and nourish the seed, then nothing will grow in the future. So this is our task. And I am honored. I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that you all gave me the chance to do this for the first time and to do it in a way that I really didn't anticipate doing it. And for making me feel welcome and safe. You've given me a real blessing. So I hope I've given you something that expresses my thanks. And I wanted to share one last prayer, basically, which was written by Wendell Berry, who's a farmer down south, a great writer. And it's called The Peace of Wild Things. And when the seed cracks open, it's painful. And when the chalice breaks, it's painful. But that's how the light goes out into the world. And we have to stand in the face of the sorrow and bear it. And if we lie on the mother, which is another one of the practices of just lying on the mother, with everything she gives us, she's healed me. And I know that she's given me the strength then to go forward to try to help heal her. So this is from Wendell, and this works. So when you face the hard part of doing this, this will help, I think. And you can look it up online. It's called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and I lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars, waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I'm free.